And welcome back to Game Escape, here today with a review of Fire Pro Wrestling Returns for the PlayStation 2, a game that I've wanted to talk about for a long time, and it is, in my opinion, the best pro wrestling video game ever released. And I know that is a bold statement, but I hope to make that argument to you guys today. This is a series that has been around for a long time. It was released initially for the PC Engine in 1989 in Japan, and since then, until this game was released, it has been a Japanese-only title, and really one of the gems of, I think, the Japanese gaming scene, and certainly the gem of the wrestling video game genre. The series has always tried to give players a very accurate representation of the sport, or of the spectacle, if you will, of professional wrestling, and it's tried to do that with in-depth rosters and roster customization options and a ton of real-life moves. And in fact, it can almost be seen as an encyclopedia of wrestling moves. And as the series evolved into the early 90s to mid-90s to late 90s through the SNES, Saturn, and PlayStation 1 iterations, you could actually discover wrestling moves that you hadn't seen on television yet, but that you might see down the road. It was incredibly cool in that respect. The visual style of the game has always remained very minimalist. It has never really strayed from those 16-bit roots, and as we can see that here, this game on the PlayStation 2, a very late release coming out in 2007, it still looks very much like the Saturn and PS1 era Fire Pro games, although the sprites here are a little bit bigger. So how does the game represent the sport of professional wrestling so well? Well, it does so with a very unique control system. In order to succeed in the game, you have to progress through a series of weak, medium, and strong strikes and grapples. And when you begin a match, you can't automatically go for the big move. So it creates this very authentic sense of pacing that you will see in an actual wrestling match. You don't automatically move to the high spot, but you string moves together and you build the match. Now, the grappling system, or the control system, is unusual. There is no way to directly initiate a grapple. There's no button input. Basically, you move your wrestler towards your opponent, and the grapple is initiated automatically. And it's up to you then to input one of the face buttons, either square for weak, X for medium, and circle for strong grapple moves, and then you just hit one of the directions on the directional pad, and so you can then have a series of moves in those categories. It feels very, I would almost say, uncomfortable coming from something like a SmackDown vs. Raw game, or coming from the N64 Aki Corporation wrestling games. It's also very difficult. The computer is extremely competitive, and the timing window is so small that you really just have to get used to the system. But as you string together moves in these three categories, and as you build the match, you have a lot of incredible moments that come about. No two matches will be the same. Based on how you implement strategy, how you use the control system, and also the attributes of the wrestlers. They all have different abilities and styles. Size, weight, and power are taken into consideration by the computer. And then there's also almost like a logic system that you can sort of tweak in the Create a Wrestler mode, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And so basically different wrestlers respond differently to in-match situations, which, would range from anything from being cut open to being locked in a submission hold. So the result is you can have these absolutely epic matches. And this version of the game, I think, does that better than any previous version. As far as match types, you of course have your standard one-on-one match, tag team matches. I believe you can have up to an 8-man tag match, 4 on each side. There's also some kind of unique modes. You have the classic wrestling cage match. You have an exploding barbed wire match, which is something that I've actually never seen in real wrestling, and hopefully won't see it. It seems a bit dangerous. Although I think those sorts of matches were kind of popular in Japan in the mid to late 90s. You have a fluorescent lighting tube plus explosive barbed wire table match. And then you have some MMA modes. You've got a Pride mode. You have a K1, which was a Japanese kickboxing promotion, which was actually pretty good. It went out of business recently. You have a UFC sort of fighting in an octagon mode, and you have a battle royal with up to 8 combatants. So the control system in Fire Pro is kind of one aspect of its presentation, kind of accurate representation of the sport of wrestling. The other part of that equation that makes this game so special is the roster. This game shipped with 327 pre-programmed built-in wrestlers. Some of them are real wrestlers, others are likenesses of well-known wrestlers here in the United States and Japan. But it gave the user 500 Create-A-Wrestler slots, and a Create-A-Wrestler system that is really second to none. I talked about how you can sort of set the logic of how a wrestler reacts in various situations, but of course you can come up with your own designs, physical features, ring attire, and then you can sort of delve into this expansive move set and create very, very accurate representations of real-life wrestlers who are not in the game, or your own kind of crazy creations. And the really cool thing is that there's a group of people who are really, really into this. And I've put a link below. You can go to Fire Pro Club, the Fire Pro Club website and forums. And so basically what this game allows you to do is import rosters and stack them. So on this Fire Pro website, someone will maybe do a New Japan, All Japan roster from the 80s. You can import that. You can then go and grab maybe not the most current WWE roster, but certainly when I picked up this game, you could get the then current WWE roster, stack that up. And so basically, my version of the game, because I was lucky enough to be able to do this through the Fire Pro website, I have 827 wrestlers, and these are expertly programmed. It is, sort of shocking when you can grab a wrestler from 70s, 80s, and 90s, and they behave in largely the same ways that you remember these guys behaving in the ring. Now, when I did this, I will admit that it was not the easiest thing to do. This is a PlayStation 2 game. So at the time, I had, and I still do have, but I was using the 60 gigabyte PS3 with the backwards compatibility, and it had a memory card program where you can actually import PS2 memory card files through a dongle, which you had to purchase separately. And so I would download the roster files, put them on my PlayStation 3, and then via the dongle import them to a physical PS2 memory card, and load the rosters in the PS2. Now, I'm not sure if this utility is still around in the newest versions of the PlayStation 3, because I guess, obviously PS2 compatibility was removed some time ago. So I think I recall reading the other way to get the rosters into your game was through, I think it was like a Game Shark USB stick, something like that. So this is not the easiest thing to do, and what you're seeing here in my video is an incredible roster that I built up using this method. So don't think that there will be 800 wrestlers available to you, and it's hard. It takes a long time to create a really good wrestler via the edit system, but that website is still active, and if there's a will, there's a way, and it's really worth pursuing to get that awesome roster. Now, I said this was the best wrestling game of all time. That's not to say that there are negatives. Again, the control system takes a lot of getting used to, particularly the striking. It is very, very difficult to kind of position your wrestler properly in a ring to deliver a strong strike. And I think that's, in a certain sense, realistic. I mean, you can't just pummel someone with your strongest striking moves, but you have this isometric perspective, and judging the distance can be hard. But then again, at the same time, it also feels rewarding when you can land a couple of strong strikes, and it really changes the momentum of a match if you can do it. The menu music is absolutely horrendous. Luckily, you can turn it off, which is what I've done, and the chime, the sound that plays as you move through different menu options and select them, is just this annoying chirp, and it really, really gets on your nerves. And of course, if you're creating wrestlers, you're going to be doing a lot of moving through different menus, so just put it on mute and preserve your sanity. One of the biggest oversights, and this is my major complaint here, is that the game gives you a really, really nice sort of bracket tournament mode and a league mode, where I think in the league mode you can bring in, 64 wrestlers and just compete through this awesome round-robin tournament. Now, the game was designed to allow you to create wrestlers, accurate representations of wrestlers, and have dream matches. So you would think, boy, it would be great to put together a 32-man tournament or 64-man round-robin and play through all of these great matches, but you actually cannot do that. You can only control one wrestler throughout these modes, which is a real shame, because you're seeing all of these awesome matches which have been created for the tournament, but you can only play as one guy. That is, I think, a major oversight. It obviously doesn't sort of kill the enjoyment you get from the game. I mean, if you're a pro wrestling fan, you can go on Excel and make your own brackets and still have incredible tournaments, but it would be nice to sort of capture that in-game. In the end, however, this is really a dream game. This is a game that I remember dreaming about in the early to mid-90s when I was playing the absolutely horrendous Acclaim wrestling games, or the actually pretty fun WrestleFest arcade game, and thinking, wow, imagine if you could have more wrestlers. Imagine if, you can combine WWF and WCW. This is a reality. This is made possible by Fire Pro Wrestling Returns and some other games in the series, and because of that, it is a absolute must-buy for wrestling fans, particularly nostalgic wrestling fans or fans of 90s Japanese wrestling and MMA, which, 90s Japanese wrestling might be the best era of wrestling of all time, because it really captures that so well. It is a very cheap game. You can find it for $10 or under on eBay, and I think it is one of the true hidden gems of not just sports games or wrestling games, but of video games. This was a series designed from the outset as a love letter to wrestling fans, and Fire Pro Wrestling Returns for the PS2 is the finest iteration in this wonderful series. So I thank you as always for watching Game Escape, and I'll be back shortly with another video.